All right, man, peace. So I'm sure many of you brothers know by now that Max Kellerman has pretty much been recognized as James Harden's #1 hater, even though I call him James Hardhead. I don't think that even I would go to the lengths that Max Kellerman has gone to try to marginalize what James Harden brings to the table. But it seems as though over the last couple of months, where James Harden has exploded, he's basically obliterated most of the NBA, not only due to his gargantuan level talent, but due to the fact that with his usage rate, he can pretty much do whatever he wants to do. He literally has the greenest light of any player I've ever seen, including Michael and Kobe. Well, now it seems as though Max Kellerman is trying to use a passive-aggressive mechanism to force James Harden to either prove him right ultimately or prove him wrong. So let's see what he has to say. Of course, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
James Harden also box office continues to make history with his offensive output in a 145-142 OT loss to the Brooklyn Nets. That was last night. Harden scored 58 points, joining Wilt Chamberlain as the only players ever NBA history with back-to-back 55-point games. Max, what did you take away from Harden's latest performance?
What I took away from it is that James Harden is the ultimate 2019 NBA basketball player. His skills are totally equipped to dominate in this era. He has no post-up game. He doesn't need one. Because due to the fact that the NBA no longer allows the defender to really get up on his opponent, up on the offensive player with the basketball, he can dribble in between his legs 5,000 times and take advantage of the fact that his defender has basically been neutered. So they don't force him to diversify his game in the regular season. That's why we see his production greatly depreciates in the postseason. I mean, let's be very clear. James Harden is still a 24, 25 point per game guy in the postseason. He's still relatively good. But because he's allowed to play in that Oscar Robertson, LeBron James type of role during the regular season, you expect great things from him in the playoffs, but it also spoils him because he becomes accustomed to the referees giving him all of these liberties that he will not get in the playoffs. So it hurts him. He's almost like a spoiled child whose parents allow him to do whatever he wants. And then when he's confronted by the real world where he has to face consequences for his actions or his misactions or lack of action, he does not know how to handle it. So they're not really doing him much of a service by allowing him to do whatever he wants in the regular season.
Once again, and this is, I know it seems like I'm harping on the playoffs, but there's a reason for that. Is Harden the MVP of the league right now? I think he's past the Greek Freak.
Well, they're going to give him the MVP award. I'm not quite sure if he's the MVP. As of right now, I would have him #1, but let me say this. Paul George is rising with a bullet. Okay? He's rising with a bullet. In another video, I stated that I would have Paul George behind James Harden, Giannis, Steph, and Jokic. Right now, Paul George has passed Jokic, and he's right there nipping at Steph's heels.
I think Harden is now the MVP of the regular season.
Right now.
Okay.
Last year, was he the best player in basketball during the regular season?
Yes. Yes, he was.
Yes, he was. That's 2 in a row now, where he's the...
But brothers, remember, last year, Max Kellerman stated that he thought that LeBron James should have won the MVP. Remember that? I did a bunch of videos about how incredulous I found it that Max Kellerman would want to give an MVP award to a player in LeBron James, who, yes, he had great and very gaudy offensive stats, but James Harden actually had better offensive stats than LeBron James. His team played in a tougher conference, and his team won about 14 or 15 more games. And Max Kellerman tried to give too much credit to Chris Paul when it was very obvious that it was James Harden who deserved the MVP award. He'd been robbed basically the year before. I mean, not really robbed, but I thought he deserved the MVP of the year before over Russell Westbrook. James Harden had already shown that he could lead the Rockets to being a 50-plus win team by himself. LeBron James has barely shown that with the Cleveland Cavaliers, even when he had Kyrie. So James Harden, yes, he deserved the MVP award last season, and it's good to see Max Kellerman finally admit that. But that's what happens when you lie. You forget your lies. Remember, once again, last year Max Kellerman said that LeBron James was light years ahead of everybody, and he deserved to be the MVP for last season. Now he's saying that James Harden deserved it.
He's the best player in basketball during the regular season. And my point is this, Stephen A. Can he be? Why is it okay to be that during the regular season? But who'd you rather have, Harden or KD? Who'd you rather have, Harden or Steph? Who'd you rather have, Harden or LeBron? Who'd you rather have, Harden or the Greek Freak or AD or whatever? What?
Let me say this very quickly. In today's NBA, I would rather have James Harden than Anthony Davis or the Greek Freak right now. Now, if the Greek Freak gets a better outside jump shot, I probably have to take him. But even Anthony Davis knows that he's not an alpha on a championship team in this era. He's just not. In this era, I would take James Harden over Anthony Davis. And James Harden has shown repeatedly that he can actually lead his team to series wins in the playoffs. Anthony Davis had never shown us that until last season.
Why do you take other players, or I do, ahead of Harden? Because when it matters most, he's no longer the best player in the world. And why is that significant? Because I'm telling you right now, if he can be the best player in the world in the playoffs, the Rockets can beat the Warriors.
Let me respond.
That's a very interesting assertion. I'm not quite sure if I agree with that. But sometimes, once again, a prominent person's greatest detractor will try to create these conventions or these parameters around which they're going to compel the focus of their criticism, that person, to either meet those expectations or confirm what they've been saying about that person the whole time. So right now, Max Kellerman is in a position where he basically has to acquiesce to the understanding that, yes, James Harden is the best player in the NBA during the regular season, not only because of his proficiency, but also the fact that he just dominates the basketball so much that it's difficult to put anybody else above him due to the system that he's in. So now he's going to go to the postseason criticism and say, James Harden, you've already proven me wrong about the regular season. Now you have to prove me wrong about the postseason. Knowing damn well that James Harden is not going to be able to defeat the Golden State Warriors in the playoffs. It's just not going to happen. So Max Kellerman knows that James Harden is going to confirm what he's been saying about James Harden, that being that he's a quote-unquote choker. Even though I don't think that James is necessarily a choker, per se, at least not on the scale that Max Kellerman asserts. But, you know, sometimes when you're in a certain era, when you're caught in that era, there's nothing that you can do.
Respond to that because I want you to come back after I finish. I think you're being unfair to James Harden. And I'm going to tell you why I think you're being unfair.
I agree.
Kevin Durant and various other superstars in this league can afford to go into cruise control, can afford to be deferential, can afford to let somebody else step up, take the mantle, pace themselves, not absorb as much punishment to the body physically, etc., etc. If James Harden does that, Houston has no chance.
A fair point.
He has to carry them on his back. And so I say that to you to say this.
The only thing that I would say in response to that is this. There are certain people who would not know how to function outside of a convention like that. What I mean is that what makes Kevin Durant great, what makes Steph Curry great, is not only what they can do with the basketball, but also what they can do when they don't have the basketball. What we find with other players, like a James Harden, a Russell Westbrook, a LeBron James, is that when they don't have the basketball on the offensive end, they just want to stand still because they're so obsessed with being in control of the entire team, of the entire offense, that they feel impotent with it when they don't have the ball. So they just watch the ball and they just stand in the corner. So in other words, James Harden, LeBron James, Russell Westbrook would not even know how to function playing in a system like Golden State, where they actually had to run and cut without the basketball. It would make them feel uncomfortable. So it's difficult for me to feel sorry for them. It's almost like when you hear this lament from women today, I'm a single mother, I'm a strong single mother, when many women today prefer to be single mothers. So why are you looking for a claim for a convention that you prefer? James Harden, LeBron James, Russell Westbrook, they prefer to be in conventions where everything is on them so that if they fail, they can claim, well, I didn't have enough help. If they're able to get the job done, then they get all the acclaim.
I look at James Harden, and this is nothing that I've said probably will disgust you as much as what I'm about to say. If James Harden keeps this up, and the Houston Rockets remain the same, and D'Antoni obviously can't find a way to find a buffer to take some of the pressure off James Harden, I don't know if any of us are in a position to judge James Harden harshly come postseason time.
And that's exactly what James Harden wants. That's my point exactly. They're going to go to the he doesn't have enough help excuse. That's why they like playing in systems like that. And let me say this also as an aside, and I've touched on this in other videos. Do I believe that James Harden is a Luciferian? Yes, I do. Do I believe that he's a monarch athlete? I think that there are very strong inclinations leaning in that direction. And people who are new to my channel or casual observers, they may not quite understand what I'm saying. Every time they show a photo of James Harden, when they do little segments on him on ESPN or Fox Sports 1, they always make sure that they have his hand in the Manu Cornuto hand sign. And of course, we all know that is also indicative of a play that they call out there on the court. But the still shot, they always make sure that he has his hand in a Manu Cornuto hand sign. And I've also seen articles written about James Harden from certain prominent reporters or what have you. And the title of the article will seem to imply, for those of us in the know, that James Harden is quote-unquote down with the program, that he is a monarch athlete who they can ratchet up or turn down whenever they want. And I've touched on this in another video, particularly when it came to his performance against the Spurs a couple of years ago in Game 6, where everybody was like, what happened to James Harden? I stated that in my view, his handlers turned him down. Other times they can turn you all the way back up. But anyway, once again, that's for another video for another day.
You cannot ask this man to carry.
No,
I know what I'm saying.
No, I think he has a legitimate.
Look at Molly. Molly be having a look on her face with Steven like, what the fuck is this guy talking about?
Point.
Why?
James Harden is very physically strong, among other things, by the way, and has to do so much that it's a legitimate point to say, what's he going to have left in the tank if he has to carry the... However,
right, but Max Kellerman, you're a boxing analyst. You understand that there are certain fighters who like to come out fast. And if you come out fast, you better build your body up so that you can maintain that pace for the entire fight. If you have stamina problems as a boxer and you always come out fast, people pretty much know how the fight is going to go once they're able to get you past the middle rounds. Zab Judah was like that. So it's up to you to improve your boxing IQ. If James Harden knows that he's a basketball player who likes to go all out, that means that he's going to have to learn how to pace himself so that he has something left in the postseason. If he chooses not to do so, that's because of what? He's a stat chaser. That's what he is.
However, this is what I'll say. LeBron's had to carry teams a bunch of times.
No, come on, Max. That's not fair.
Wait, time out. Well, you know why it's fair? That's what I'm saying about Harden. In the regular season, he's better than LeBron James,
that's
right?
What I mean.
What happens in the playoffs?
That's...
He said it again. Max Kellerman admitted it again. He said in the regular season, James Harden is better than LeBron James. So why last regular season was Max Kellerman trying to make the case for LeBron James being the MVP, other than maybe Max Kellerman is on the payroll of LeBron James and co. As I've been telling you brothers before, there's very little doubt in my mind that there are certain quote-unquote analysts scattered across ESPN, Fox Sports 1, etc., who are on the take from LeBron James and co. Just my view of it. Of course, what I'm saying is alleged.
That's not why I'm saying it's unfair. I'm saying it's unfair because LeBron is 6'9", 260.
Let me tell you something.
Come on, man. He's usually abusing people.
This ain't boxing. This ain't pound for pound. Your size counts in how you play. The taller players are better than shorter players a lot of the time.
Well, taller players are better than shorter players if the skill set is relatively equivalent.
Level of physicality, the level of physicality that he can implement, and the manner in which he can punish opponents on the basketball court, that's entirely different than Harden, man.
And beyond that, LeBron James' style of play is much more based in conserving energy during the regular season. We all know that.
It doesn't matter. That's part of what makes him great. So do what you got to do, James. He's a strong guy. The point is this: or if you're not strong enough or big enough, that counts against you.
I agree with that.
My point is this, Stephen A. Let's choose up teams like you've been doing on the playground. I'm saying if James Harden's the MVP in the regular season, now it's the playoffs, you're choosing up teams, and take him first. Let's imagine he's the guy you would take first of everyone between Golden State and Houston. Boom, you got the best player. Next two picks, let's say, are KD and Steph. If he's healthy, the next pick is CP3. That means the top 4 picks are divided among the two teams, and you got the best player. Let's keep going. Who's the next pick? It may be Clint Capella the way Draymond's been playing, or maybe it's Clay and then if you...
Max Kellerman. This is Max Kellerman's problem. He tries too hard to be insightful when all you have to do is be linear and get to the point. Nobody's going to take Clint Capella over Klay Thompson because Clint Capella is way too dependent on either James Harden or Chris Paul to get him the basketball because he cannot do anything offensively other than dunk. We all know that. Now, if you get Houston to play their style of basketball, Clint Capella can be a very effective player on both ends. But Klay Thompson, no. Klay Thompson's a guy who can detonate for 65 points in 3 quarters. So let's stop it right there. And then on top of that, there's Boogie Cousins.
If you went 8 deep. 4 would be on one team, 4 would be on the other. If it's like that, the team with the best player should win. James Harden would be the best player when it counts most.
You know what's so interesting, especially with LeBron James superfans like Max Kellerman? He'll lay out a scenario like that where he'll say James Harden and CP3 basically can nullify Steph Curry and Kevin Durant. But he won't use that same quote-unquote logic when LeBron James had Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love and they got mollywopped against Golden State when Golden State did not even have DeMarcus Cousins yet. Once again, if you compare Steph Curry and Kevin Durant to LeBron James and Kyrie Irving, and they were playing 2-on-2, I'm not quite sure who I would pick there. So why was LeBron James not even at least able to get that series to Game 7? According to Max Kellerman, James Harden with CP3 is supposed to be able to defeat the Golden State Warriors with all those players and DeMarcus Cousins. But when it comes to LeBron James, he'll make a bunch of excuses for why he lost in 5.
But you know what? Let's not forget Steve Kerr against Mike D'Antoni. Let's not forget a coach that prioritizes defense and has won championships because of it, who wanted to implement that when he was the GM in Phoenix and D'Antoni was his coach, and D'Antoni didn't want to listen, and as a result, it didn't happen. So we can't forget. We gotta remember who you have to actually go against. And in the end, what it comes down to is this. To get to your point, Molly, listen. I know that it's dicey because to be so great, to absolve somebody like James Harden, of course you don't normally do something like that. But I saw D'Antoni, and I respect the hell out of Mike D'Antoni, I truly do. But he ran Kobe into the ground.
Yeah.
No, sir. Kobe Bryant ran himself into the ground.
And I'm looking
Kobe ran himself into the ground.
Thank you, sir.
Because he's trying to make the playoffs, man.
Yeah, no doubt.
Okay, so then just say that. Don't accuse Mike D'Antoni of running Kobe Bryant into the ground. And then when Max Kellerman correctly refutes you, now you want to change your story right away and say he was trying to make the playoffs. Well, was Kobe playing too many minutes because he was trying to make the playoffs or because Mike D'Antoni ran him into the ground? Do not blame D'Antoni for your boy's megalomaniacal bad decision making.
No doubt.
CP3 and Capella will be back. He won't be in that position anymore.
You're not hearing us, Molly. D'Antoni doesn't coach defense like that. And
Right. They've already brought back Bizdelic. Stephen A. Smith is all over the place. And the issue is that all he had to do was hone in on Max's bullshit about his expectations for James Harden. Right now, Max Kellerman is trying to set the bar so high for James Harden, knowing that he's not going to be able to reach that bar, so that he can come back after the Rockets get knocked out of the playoffs and say, see, I told you that he's the biggest choker in sports history.
Dallas does.
Bizdelic does, yes. But D'Antoni doesn't. He's the head man. Steve Kerr emphasizes that it matters. And if you are James Harden, having to carry the load that he's carrying,
I want to say something. I want to say something about that. You're right. He might be diminished. No one wants to hear these excuses. No one, remember what I said about the Chargers were heading to Baltimore? Hey, Phillip Rivers, no one wants to hear, but it was a tough matchup. Either you win the game or you don't. Here's the thing about James Harden. If CP3 and Capella are healthy, with PJ Tucker and the whole thing, they got a crew.
If they're healthy.
I am not rooting
Max Kellerman said if PJ Tucker and Capella are healthy, they got a crew. With a 30-some-odd-year-old Chris Paul who, to be quite frank with you, has a body of a 45-year-old who goes to the gym 4 days a week. But when LeBron James had Kyrie Irving, probably the most offensively diverse in his forms of attack point guard in the game, and Kevin Love, and J.R. Smith, who has spots where he can be a very effective player, both on offense and defense, and Tristan Thompson, who could be a very effective big man, very similar to Clint Capella, by the way. When LeBron James had all those guys, he could only win one game against the Golden State Warriors and got outplayed by Kevin Durant to the point where he had to try to compensate for it by stuffing the stat sheet.
Against James Harden, I am rooting for him. It would be a more interesting NBA universe if James Harden and the Rockets could upset the Warriors. Life would be more interesting. Our jobs would be more interesting. I'm rooting for him. I'm not saying this to set him up for failure. I'm saying he is capable of being the best player in the universe when it doesn't matter as much. Can he do it when it matters most?
Why does he get cold in the playoffs? Like, what do you attribute that to?
Well, first of all,
obviously he's a superstar.
First of all,
It's because his form of play does not translate as well into the playoffs when you're going against teams that have a very high basketball IQ, especially defensively. And then on top of that, he's not a transcendent athlete. So he's unable to rise above big men at the basket when he's run off the three-point line. Then on top of that, he has no post-up game. So he's unable to put pressure on the defense when they're able to put more pressure on him. That's how you counter a defense that puts a lot more pressure on you. You post them up, you try to get them down low, and force the referee to make calls for you. The referees are not giving him the same calls in the playoffs that they give him in the regular season, because they basically let him get away with murder. He lowers his shoulder, he lowers his head, he initiates contact in the regular season. They're not going to make those calls for him or in his favor in the playoffs. So that's why his value depreciates. And then on top of that, he does not play well without the basketball.
Sometimes your shot ain't just ain't full. Sometimes you don't get the calls as well. Because you got to remember, James Harden is a genius as an offensive basketball player. He knows how to draw fouls. He knows how to get to the free throw line, create contact, etc., etc. The problem is that you don't always get those calls come postseason time.
Exactly.
Time. So that's one point. But the bottom line is this: when we look at him, Max, Molly, if the man is averaging 40, right, and then come postseason time, he's averaging 28. Yeah. And instead of shooting 45%, he's shooting 42%.
Well, here's the problem, Stephen A. Smith. For the most part, James Harden is around a 43, maybe 44% shooter, even in the regular season. So it's very difficult to look at him as an efficient offensive player. He's really not efficient. I give him credit for being proficient, but not so much efficient.
He's shooting under 30 from three.
No, I understand that. But what I'm saying hypothetically before. I'm not going to look at him and say he's...
His three-point shooting percentage will go up a lot more if he was better at shooting threes without it always having to be off the dribble with the basketball in his hand. One of the reasons why Steph Curry is so proficient as a three-point shooter is because not only is he taking threes off the dribble, but he's also a great catch-and-shoot three-point shooter. So it's difficult for the defense to find him oftentimes in the offense to stop him from pulling up for three. That's going to boost your three-point shooting percentage up 6, 7, maybe even 10 percentage points.
Yeah, but I don't think he's going to have to carry the load
like this down the stretch. The money's on the line. Hit your shots, period.
Got it.
Right.
I'm down with that.
Yeah.
Money on the line.
Money on the line.
I'm down with that.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. I just found it relatively comical, the things that Max Kellerman was able to admit just for the sake of putting James Harden in the guillotine, potentially for the playoffs, because that's what he's trying to do. But anyway, peace.